If you're buying a project to flip and you close on that project and you can't tell me within $5,000 to $6,000 what you're going to be selling it for, at the end, then we have a problem. Regardless of what you find in the next 45, 60 days during the renovation, that is not going to change that sales price at all. The market's not going to move just because you had a problem. The market's going to be what the market's going to be, and you already know that. It's going to be how you manage your costs in that problem. Ooh. And if you don't know that ahead of time, then your deal was dead. Your profit was dead before you even started. Good morning, this is Lance Kenmore with the Kenmore team, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's edition of the Tri-Cities Real Estate Update. As always, you can contact me, Lance Kenmore, anytime direct on my cell phone at 509-727-8977, or visit us on the web at kenmoreteam.com. Once again, I always like to thank John for hosting and everybody here at the station for working to make this happen. Mr. John McKay, how you doing over there?
It's been busy. Not too bad of a week weather-wise.
Okay, that is fantastic. I know I snuck out of the country south for a very quick trip.
Okay.
And so this is just how timing works. I leave and I missed the northern lights.
Oh, you didn't miss much.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
I went out. I wasn't going to climb on the roof. We reserved that for fireworks.
Okay, we reserved that for fireworks.
But where we live, because of neighboring, there's trees, big trees down the block, and because of the light pollution, we didn't see anything.
Okay, so and this is what happens with our Instagram, TikTok, Facebook world. If you were only looking at that like I was from my vacation.
Oh, it was beautiful.
You would have thought I missed the biggest thing in Tri-Cities to ever happen.
But you would have had to drive 10 or 15 miles outside of town. I'm like,
okay.
11 o'clock at night. It's,
Well, I still think it's cool that it came.
It is.
Though. Yes. So yeah, Tri-Cities had a new attraction.
Except for the farmers whose GPS on their equipment got messed up.
Oh, yeah, from the solar flares. Yeah, they were not, and they were not planting.
There was a guy in the Dakotas that found one of his tractors was driving in circles.
Well, I know about that coming from the ag world a little bit. And, back in the old day, we used to have these things on the tractors called markers. And so it would leave a mark out halfway from where you needed to drive. So when you turn around, you would follow that mark. Well, with GPS came along and stuff, they stopped shipping planters with markers on them.
Yep.
And now, so when the solar flares happened, there were a lot of parked tractors that did not know what to do.
The auto steer wouldn't work.
I'm dating myself now a lot.
They're going to find out in a few months. They'll have clumps of crops here and very few plants there because it's all very carefully controlled, even how far down in the soil you put it.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see. So shout out to our ag boys out and girls out there, and I'm glad that the northern lights and solar flares are gone. We can get back to regular agriculture around here.
Yes.
Well, John, I always like to start off with our crazy celebrity house story. Now, this one, not too bad as far as millions and millions. There is a Chicago home that has been in a number of films. It was actually featured in season 1 of the award-winning show The Bear. And this was a house that hosted one of the kids' birthday parties where the not-so-great Uncle Jimmy might have included some punch for the kids laced with Xanax. So
okay.
If you remember that.
I think I probably missed that one.
Episode was in there. Also, what's interesting about this house is it is has a very French chateau look to it, so it films very well. And maybe you would have better seen this. It was also used in a WeatherTech commercial, which those are the floor mats that I have in one of my trucks. So I'm hoping that's the same WeatherTech it is. I think it possibly is. And so this house has been featured in a couple different commercials and films. Well, it's on the market now in Chicago for $2 $2.2 million.
Wow.
Gorgeous property, but it's 5,800 square feet. Originally built in the 40s, and then extensively renovated in 2005. And so that property could be yours, McKay, for just under $2.2 million. So that's our...
I'll go home and check the change
Go
jar.
home and check the change drawer and see what we get there. So that is our crazy celebrity house story for the week. We already talked about our local story. For me, it was the new attraction in Tri-Cities of the Northern Lights. And so, yeah, fun to just kind of see some different weather patterns and things making that available here in Tri-Cities. Well, this week's topic, I always like to take the topics of what people are asking questions about, what's going on in the community, and then bringing that here to the show. And probably over the course of the last 2 months, I've gotten a number of questions that have to do with house flipping. If you ever watch, if you watch any of HGTV, or you've seen the shows, Flipping Out or Fix This House or Chip and Joanna Gaines, if you've read any of their books, originally started in Waco as basically house flippers. There's a number of investment groups in Tri-Cities that will occasionally talk about this. We have a number of clients that flip a lot of homes in Tri-Cities. And then I've been personally involved with hundreds of flips as well. And so we like to kind of take that experience and bring that to our clients and help them when they ask questions about this. And so today, I thought I would call what I called the anatomy of a flip and break down, what some numbers look like. What are some of the things that we're evaluating when people say, hey, I'm looking at getting into that business. I would like to try to flip a house. What does that look like, Lance? And how would I go about that?
A big pile of boards?
Yeah, a big pile of boards is something, McKay. But let me tell you where I start with people. Number one, I tell everybody, because I've seen so many disasters in this situation.
The money pit?
The money pit, because don't try to do something too big.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people that say, hey, I want to flip houses, or I want to get into flipping houses. And they don't realize that there's a lot of people doing that. So there's some competition there. There's people looking for those deals. And they, instead of a $250,000 or $300,000 house, they come across a $550,000 house that hasn't sold yet or has some issues. And they're like, man, I should take that project on. And I always caution people, if you haven't done it before, do not take on too big of a project, because the numbers can get out of control very quickly, and people don't realize that, and they can get themselves in a lot of trouble. So I wrote down, as I started taking notes for the show, the two biggest issues that I see, problems that I've had to help people get out of. And that is, number one is taking on luxury flips too soon in your career. It's a different market. If you haven't done it before, you're probably going to get burned there. And then the second item that I wrote down that I've had to come in and help a lot of people get out of problems with is out-of-town flippers. Trying something new in a market you haven't been involved in before. A lot of people, they swoop into town. They think that there is just these national standards that apply everywhere. And they either build something that's different, or they do something that is very Seattle-ish or Portland-ish. And I'm not just picking on those. I mean, it could be any big city. And they say, I'm going to bring that to Tri-Cities, and everybody's going to pay a premium for it, and it's going to be amazing. And it's an absolute, because it's not normal here, it's an absolute turnoff to people, and they can't sell it. Yes. I mean, I've seen one of the ones that, and it's more accepted now than it was, but I mean, I've seen a new build company come from out of town, we'll say, go into a development and then do alley-loaded garages in Tri-Cities. Now, I've been in those houses with client after client after client, and almost every single time it's an issue. That's just one example of a very popular product in a in a more urban environment that does not translate dollar for dollar into our area. So those are just some of the things that I tell people. Pay attention to the local customs of where you're building and what's being built. And if this is your first time flipping, don't try to go too far out of the lines with that project. Second question we get asked a lot is, where do I find the deals for the flips? And a lot of people are surprised by this. We have a lot of clients that actually find some of those deals in the MLS with an agent in the MLS. Now, it takes some practice. You have to know what you're looking for. It's probably not likely going to be that house that is, on the market in the first 2 or 3 days. You might have to go a little bit outside of some of the traditional search parameters, and you're probably going to have to make offers on 5 to 10 properties and not, get all of them. Like, you might have to make offers on 5 to 10 properties and only get one of them because of the metrics that you're working with. But MLS source properties are definitely an option. The other thing that I wrote down that a lot of people do, and I do this myself included, is a lot of people will advertise for deals. I mean, there's different ways they can do that. I've seen people use road signs. You can call them road signs. They're also called bandit signs. Check your local city ordinances, though, I will say.
They look like those political campaign signs.
100%.
We'll buy your house.
And some are handwritten. Some are printed to look like they're handwritten. There's a bunch of tricks that they use. And then I will tell you, when you check your city ordinances, you're probably going to find there's a reason why they're called bandit signs, because they're probably not legal to be there. So you want to make sure you're following those city ordinances, because if not, you're going to pay a bunch of money and then the signs are going to get removed.
Yeah.
But road signs, electronic billboards now, I see a lot of people advertising on those, regular billboards. These are all different. Direct mail is another way that people can find these opportunities, by mailing non-owner occupied households, introducing yourselves and what you're able to do. So there's probably 20 or 30 different ways to come across these flip deals and
you ever
find
seen,
these deals.
I've gotten text messages before.
You've got text
unsolicited.
Yes, exactly. So, John, exactly. So that's one of those 20 to 30 ways.
Delete.
There are services that will do that. You are one of the 99% that probably delete those. But there are services that you can hire that will send those out.
Yeah.
And then 1% might respond, and talk to those people and stuff. I mean, you have my permission. If you get that text message, you can respond and just say, no thanks, I do all my deals with Lance Kenmore.
Okay, I'm going to remember that.
That is a valid response. This is a gift I'm giving you. And so they love that when they receive those back. So there's one option for you, John. Okay.
I'm going to remember that.
Now we're going to talk about another way that people find these deals. There's a segment of real estate called wholesaling. There's a number of people in our local Tri-Cities market that their job is they source and find deals that are undervalued, under market deals. You get on their list as an investor, and then when they find those deals, they will send those deals out to their investor list. They're like the intermediary between. People have found a number of deals doing that. And then sometimes neighbors and word of mouth. If people know you're an investor or you buy homes and that gets out, you will get a certain amount of referrals for that. And so I just say, pick a method that you're interested in. Do the research on that. If you have any questions about what that looks like, please feel free to go to kenmoreteam.com, shoot us a message. Like I say, we work with some of the biggest flippers in town on the retail side of the business, and also sourcing the deal, helping them find the deal through the MLS, then helping them resell it when the project is done. So the next thing I went into was, now you think you might have a deal. right? And so you have to look and you really have to evaluate what that looks like. And here's where a couple big mistakes happen. And people are sometimes surprised by this because one of the ways that you get a deal in those situations is you're making a cash offer. You're making it easy for the seller to sell to you, right? But the problem is what I tell people is no matter what the condition of that house is, or what you think it is and what you think you know, I still advocate getting a home inspection.
Yeah.
And I've lost deals with this before because there's other flippers in town. I'm just going to tell you, you have to look at what your risk tolerance is.
Yeah.
There's some flippers in town and they'll say, well, I'm giving somebody an offer that's as is. I'm willing to make all of the repairs. Well, that's fine, but you can still make an as is offer that has an inspection. Especially if you're upfront with the seller and talk to them about, here's what we're looking for. Because there's some things that drastically change your offer on the surface. Just off the top of my head, if I'm looking and evaluating something, for me, termites is a big deal. If there's been termite, if damage in a house and you have to go in and you have to repair that. And a lot of people say, well, we don't really have that in Tri-Cities, Lance. You haven't sold enough real estate in Tri-Cities then is what I say, because we do. And so when I find that affects value long-term, not just for your current deal. Even if you fix it all, you now have to disclose that that's happened, and it's going to affect when you go to resell, even though it's deemed fixed.
Yeah.
So that's a big one that we're looking for. Sometimes we're also looking for structural damage is another one. If we're structural with the foundation, or we're structural with the roofing and the trusses, or there's been some settling and some structural cracking, those are, in many cases, those are no-goes for me, okay? Because we talk about each investor, you have to determine your own risk tolerance.
Yeah.
For me, it might be a no-go. For somebody that has fixed that 10, 20 times, and maybe they own a construction company, for them, it might be no problem at all. So that investor, it might be just fine. But for my standards, for me, it's generally a no-go in that situation, and I'm passing, and another investor is picking that up. So you have to look at those, but those are big red flags that I would look out at for sure. The other thing that I tell a lot of people, and a lot of times they miss on this, and with the access to information on such simple sites, we talk about Zillow on the show all the time, and that they might be wrong, on some of their numbers, and you really need to double check. But as a starting point, with the access to information on websites like homes.com, Zillow.com, and then real estate agents, I mean, there's 1,200 of us at least in this local market, right? You should know before you have that offer on the project you're going to flip, within, let's just say, $5,000 to $6,000, you should know what price you're going to sell it for. If you're buying a project to flip and you close on that project and you can't tell me within $5,000 to $6,000 what you're going to be selling it for, at the end, then we have a problem in the process. And so that really forces you to go back and look into that property and say, okay, now, what can I set my budget at for repairs? Because if you work that number backwards, you can say, how much can I spend on the remodel? How much is the commission going to be when I sell this house? What are the taxes going to be along the way? And so that lets you know what profit margin you're going for. And then anytime you're over budget on one of those main categories, that's eating away from that profit number that you have. And then eventually you'll be in a loss on that property. So just really being careful on how much you're spending, because if you watch too much HGTV and that's what you've known and you've done that, you're going to be like, oh man, I can put tile on these floors where your budget just said it should have been LVP. Or I can do a full height backsplash to the ceiling instead of just doing a single row of tiles for the backsplash in the kitchen. Little things like this, that it starts to be $1,500 here, $2,000 there. Next thing you know, you might have a $20,000 profit margin, and you've eaten up, 13 or 14,000 of it with unnecessary items that you've added.
Yes.
So you've got to make sure that you can get done what's comparable to get your final price within your budget. That's a big one. The other thing that I wrote down for people is have an idea of what your investment goal is. And by that, I mean a backup strategy. So for instance, a lot of people talk about in the investment world, people might have heard what we call the BRRRR method, and that's BRRRR. And a lot of investors use this, and what that stands for is buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and then repeat. So what are people doing there? If they find a below market deal that they're going to rehab, and maybe instead of flipping, you decide you want to rent it because you have a good equity position in that.
Okay.
So what you can do is you can buy the property, you can get it fixed up and renovated, get a renter, fill it with a renter, and then you can then get the property reappraised at what the new value is. And if you want to, you can use that new appraised value to pull your equity back out of that property, and then use that equity because you could generally get an investment property loan that was 75% of the value of the property. Then you can pull that money back out of the property and go buy your next rental property. And so this is a strategy that a lot of investors use. There's some different things you have to look out for with what's going on. That adds another layer. If you're not just flipping it, the next layer to that is, do you have the ability to refinance that property, or are you just going to leave all of your cash tied up in that property? And then, also, what does it rent for? So just as much as I was adamant that you knew what the sales price of the property is, I really want you to do some rental analysis and know what you're going to be able to rent the property for. And so then you can do some estimates on, will you get your money back out of the property, or will you just be out the cash you had for the renovations? And then I always look for properties that are going to be resellable to the largest market possible. Yeah. So for instance, I tell people, if you're going to start with something, start with what we call a 3-2 Rambler with a fenced yard. So that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath property with a fenced yard. Yeah. Why do I say that to people? Well, when it's a Rambler, you open up the marketability of the property, meaning if somebody's downsizing because they can't do stairs anymore, they can purchase your Rambler. Yes. If you have a 2-story, you're taking out all the people that can't do stairs. So they can purchase your Rambler. If you have a first-time home buyer, first-time home buyers are a lot more likely to buy a smaller Rambler than they are a bigger 2-story house. So now we have first-time home buyers in the mix, which are 34% of our market, we know, if you know your stats. And then we also have people downsizing that can buy that house. And then also, I have other investors that are wanting to buy the house. So now my exit strategy says I have fixed up and flipped a house that appeals to the largest market possible. Yes. That means you can sell it faster, it's more liquid, and if you get yourself into a problem, we can get you out of it faster. At the top of the hour, I talked about all the times where I cringe. That's when an investor calls me and they've done a luxury flip. My market that I just described to you is probably 70% of the Tri-Cities market. If you mess up on a luxury flip, there's probably only 2% of the market that we can sell that house to. And so it's going to be a much, much harder situation. So have a backup strategy that is either the BRRRR strategy or the hold strategy, or selling wholesale to a family member potentially. Having these different backup strategies in play will make your flip project go better in that situation. The other thing that I wrote down that happens is I said map out your profit margin carefully. And so leave yourself a buffer. Banks are really good at this, like in new construction, right? So if you go in and get a new construction loan, and you have a budget and a build cost, a banker will generally tell you, one that's done a lot of new construction will say, you'll get down the spreadsheet and you'll be like, what's this 10% line at the bottom? And he'll say, well, that's an overage line. Like, because you came in to get financing for a $500,000 house, and that's what you wanted a loan for. And since I do this day in and day out, I can tell you if you're normal, by the time we're done, that's going to be $550,000. Because you're picking out things for a custom home, or they're allowing you to. And every time we tell somebody that their budget for flooring is $10,000 and they go up to Merle's or they go to Great Floors and they're like, but I walked in and this one is so much prettier.
Yeah.
They come back and it's not 10,000, it's 11,500 or 12. And then you do that on 10 different items in a build, you're going to have an issue. So in flipping, you've got to really, really be careful. Do you have that overage built into your profit margin, or are you going to be very, very disciplined on that budget number? It's one or the other. And so you've got to kind of look at that and see what strategy you're going to use in that. Because I flip these houses, I work with my wife, and I think most people, know in the community. And I'm terrible at like wanting to do the cool backsplashes. I will tell you that all day long. And she's really, really good at telling me that at the end of the project, it's not going to make a hill of beans difference, and not to do that. Like, we got in a huge fight like last year because we did a surround on a fireplace, and I wanted to do a chevron pattern. Which, if you know what that means, like the pattern, it is a nightmare for the tile guy. She walked in and she said, what the H is going on around the fireplace? And I'm like, it's gorgeous. And yeah, we didn't sell that house for a penny more because I should have just done a regular tile pattern. So I got in trouble on that one. So if you have a team or somebody you can bounce ideas off like that, it's really good because you can have somebody that's really good with the numbers and watching that. And there's some compromise there, right? Like, there's some times when you can spend that money and you're going to get it back. You're not going to get it back on a chevron tile pattern, right? But it's cool. It's really cool, McKay. I could show it to you someday. See, you don't care at all. See, you'd be perfect for the other half of that. So just have a team member that you can bounce ideas off of, or somebody in your family you can work with to bounce ideas off. It helps a ton. And just leave room for some of those unexpected costs. At the very end of this day, I say, have a contingency built in there. Ask a professional what you think you can get that thing sold for. So we love to help people go down this journey, buy their first investment property. Maybe it's a rehab you're doing for a rental. Maybe it's a flip that you want to do. Go to kenmoreteam.com. If you're considering this for the first time or want to know more about that, shoot us a message. We can get one of our great agents to talk to you about that process. And I'll be right back here talking real estate again next week.
Right here on News Talk 870.